Matthew, behind me you can see the New York City skyline. And I got a question for you. So I know you went to New York a couple months ago, and I was wondering, when you went, what was your biggest takeaway from comparing, what happens in New York with all this huge real estate like you can see behind me, and then, what happens in Baton Rouge where it's similar, it's smaller markets?
Paul, there were two things that I noticed about the real estate in New York City as it compares to our market of Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and just by driving around New York, right? In New York and the outlying areas, right? So one thing was that there were way more for sale by owner and for lease by owner signs on commercial properties in New York than there are in Baton Rouge. I have no idea why that is. Maybe it's because there's more, there's more eyeballs, there's more traffic in New York, so there's more reason to believe that an owner can get a tenant just by putting a sign in front of a building without going out and hunting them down like we do. The second thing I noticed was that, a very related point is that I'm just riding around New York, right? Just like looking at signs, looking at buildings, looking at signs for sale, for lease. And one, there was no dominant brokerage company in any of the parts of New York that I went in, it seemed, based off signage. Now, New York, you got bigger buildings, right? You got buildings where the signage might not be, readily apparent, or maybe they don't even have signage, right? Because it's a whole different thing. If you're selling a skyscraper, you don't necessarily put a for sale sign out in front, right? But in our market in Baton Rouge, you can tell a lot about who's moving and shaking, who's gotten market share, who's killing it by how many signs on the ground, because most of the listings in our market have signs. So I thought that was interesting. Also thought that it was interesting that with all like the big companies and everything, there wasn't, in terms of signage, a dominant player. And there was a ton of boutique firms that seemed to be, if anything, the dominant player in some of Long Island and different areas of New York, greater New York area. So those are my takeaways.